Just Passing By, a PowerPoint story by Miss C. As I emerged from beneath the surface, I was warmed by the golden rays of the sun beaming from above. I found myself on the Libyan shores of the Mediterranean Sea. A young girl scooped me out and poured me into a moat around a triple-decker sandcastle. She splashed and played until I soon found myself in her hair. The warm African sun gave me such energy. Evaporation pulled me from her flaxen strands upward into the atmosphere. I was free, yet not alone. Around and around in a rising thermal, I lost my heat energy, as did my fellow water molecules. So we condensed and formed a cumulus cloud over the pyramids in Giza, Egypt. The current carried us over farmers growing crops along the Nile and over starving people in the Darfur region of Sudan. More and more of us accumulated until we reached maximum capacity, becoming a cumulonimbus cloud. Down, down, we precipitated right into Lake Victoria near the shores of Tanzania. Down below the surface, I encountered several types of protists. A spirostomum, long strands of spirogyra, some volvoxes, and a very inquisitive Stylonychia. Oh snap! A cichlid fish just swallowed me. First, I passed through the esophagus, then the stomach, and the intestines. It was a familiar route. This time, however, I diffused through a villi into the bloodstream, up to the heart, then to the gills, and I was out again. But not in the lake, in a swamp called Goguda. This swamp was special. It was a hippo spa. It smacked of mutually beneficial behavior. The cichlids nipped all the parasites off the large mammals, making them squeaky clean and itch-free. There were lots of eubacteria breaking down the rotting leaf litter and excrement in the murky pool, teeming with zooplankton. A small current whisked me into a tributary that flowed into Lake Natron, a very harsh environment indeed. I saw tall spires of crusty salt and pink halophilic archaebacteria that loved the place. Once again, the heat gave me the energy to evaporate up and away. This time, I was transported eastward towards the volcano Kilimanjaro, where I precipitated as snow. An ice climber named Rob Taylor was pushing the limits on the icy slopes when, That's when I found myself being viewed under a microscope by a doctor, along with over 300 varieties of microbes that had infected the climber after the bad accident. The doctor wiped off the slide with me on it and flushed it down the toilet at the research hospital. Into the groundwater I went. Gravity was a relentless force acting on my buddies and me. Into the Indian Ocean we flowed, first encountering an estuary between the fresh and the salt water. The equatorial current carried me south for a while, where I had a brief encounter with a migrating quail. I went into its mouth and straight out the blowhole until I gained the energy to evaporate and move more quickly. This time, I floated northward towards the country of Bangladesh. A monsoon dropped me into the Ganges River just above the confluence with the Brahmaputra. The Ganges was way more polluted and crowded with microbes and bacterial parasites than the Brahmaputra. Yuck! I was briefly slapped up against the Ganges gabial near the Sundarbans of the river delta. Quietly resting near the shore of a lagoon, I was lapped up and mixed with the saliva of a rare and beautiful Bengali tiger. Peristalsis moved me along its entire digestive tract, where I was eliminated onto some ferns on the forest floor. That night, I was transpired back into the atmosphere and was transported across the Bay of Bengal towards the country of Burma. No breaks because I was always on the move. I condensed in a dewdrop on a tomato plant in the garden of Aung San Suu Kyi. She gently plucked the tomato from its vine and sliced it into bite-sized wedges. As is custom in the streets of Rangoon, food is often left for the monks in training. Suu Kyi took the bowl of tomatoes along with a healthy serving of rice and placed them near a prayer wheel for the young practitioners. The monks consumed the food appreciatively and left the bowl out in the sunshine. I was in the process of evaporating when I smacked into a seagull that was flying east. While buried in the feathers of my avian pilot, I saw beautiful Burmese Buddhas, some kites and streamers waving back and forth in a Siamese festival in Bangkok, Thailand. The incredible ruins of Angkor Wat in Cambodia, and the sad landscape of the killing fields, a legacy left behind by the Khmer Rouge in the 1970s. I condensed with my buddies and chilled in a fluffy cloud for a while. We kicked back and made passage into Vietnam. We were floating over the Mekong River when the monsoon winds blew in, causing us to precipitate. Down, 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 into the river, surrounded by rainforest. The Mekong is the lifeblood of Indochina and was bustling with activity. At one point, I slam dunked against the bottom of a long, narrow boat covered with mold and algae. In the algae, I saw an amoeba eating bacteria. How cool are false feet! I also spied some really sick protozoans that cause cholera, amoebic dysentery, and malaria, just to name a few. Now, close to the bank of the river, I could see beautiful ferns in the understory of the rainforest, algae and moss growing on the rocks, and a cyclops in a puddle, swimming in circles. I could hear noisy crickets chirping for a mate. I saw the face of a feral dog leaning over to quench its thirst. Nope, not this time. I continued my journey to the sea. As the river widened, I found myself in open water beneath the warm Southeast Asian sun. Heat, the ticket to the sky. Evaporation, condensation, and precipitation happen rather quickly in the tropics. I precipitated onto a palm tree leaf where I ran off and leached into the soil. The dirt had these incredible detritivores that ate through the soil like rock crushers. Earthworms, I think they're called. I said farewell and goodbye to the soft segmented annelids. Not much time passed until I was sucked up by the roots of a tree and directed up into the branches and then out to the leaves where there were many outgoing intersections. That night I left the leaf through an opening called a stoma and proceeded to transpire into the atmosphere. I floated over the South China Sea and the northern islands of the Philippines. Taiwan and Hong Kong were to my left as my neighboring molecules and I condensed to form a cloud over the Sea of Japan. Down we went right into a famous geyser called the Hells of Beppu. We ran into lots of thermophilic archaebacteria while swirling around in a mini convection tornado. Carl Stetter would have loved it. Eventually, the heat caused me to evaporate again. We relaxed in the clouds, which traveled eastward over the Pacific Ring of Fire, then precipitated into the Pacific Ocean. Cold currents forced me to descend into the depths of the Marianas Trench, the world's deepest. The archaebacteria down there were living in these crazy animals called tube worms. They love sulfur and other earthly chemicals. How cool is chemosynthesis? The geothermal heat and the Kuroshio current moved me onward and upward. I found myself swirling around green sea turtles, tuna, and small shrimp called krill. Uh-oh, here comes trouble. A pod of dolphins circled the fish that were eating the krill, that were feasting upon the zooplankton near the surface. Those dolphins exhibited such cooperation and intelligence. But where did they all go? Out to sea. I felt a huge rumble. Oh, snap. An earthquake. 9.0 on the Richter scale. All of us in the vicinity swelled up and then back down as the huge wave passed. Energy. I need energy to witness this event. Nearing the surface, I gained heat for evaporation. Now it was time for rapid movement to see the horror of a tsunami. My fellow water molecules near the shore were slammed against huge buildings, breaking them into bits of rubble and washing the rubble inland for a mile. What's that? I encountered a different kind of energy, not heat. It was radiation from the nuclear power plant. The temperature dropped. We condensed and precipitated into the soil of a Zen garden in Tokyo. The bonsai tree that I landed on was soon packaged and made ready for export to China. The barge crossed the Yellow Sea and made port near the city of Tianjin, near Beijing. Still in the bonsai package, a young Mongolian camel herder purchased the plant for a few yen. The plant and I were carted through a blizzard all the way to a yurt near Ulaanbaatar. The herder unwrapped the package and surprised his fiancée with the bonsai tree as a present. While the two engaged in a deeply philosophical conversation about camels, I evaporated and was drawn into a wind current that carried me southwest over the Gobi Desert. No precipitating here. Passing over herds of elk, I witnessed the plateau of Tibet, then mountains, very tall mountains. The chill wind slapped me upside the second tallest mountain of the Himalayas, K2. No energy. Very little movement here in the Sachem Glacier. Slowly, ever so slowly, I moved down the slope in an ice river pulled by gravity. I might just be here for a while.